During the 19th century and early 20th centuries, freak shows and sideshows, as some were called then, were extremely popular forms of entertainment, and no circus merited the name without them. They began their popularity during the mid 16th century, and this continued till the early 20th century.
A freak show is an exhibition of biological rarities, referred to as freaks of nature. This comes in many forms. People with unusual physical features like being uncommonly small or tall, extra or missing limbs, or a rare physical deformity. Also, people who are heavily tattooed or pierced, and people who could swallow swords or fire. The images you are about to see are all real people who performed in these shows. Matthias Buchinger, born in 1674 without arms or legs, died in 1740. General Tom Thumb, Charles Stratton, born in 1838, a dwarf who died in 1883. William Henry Johnson, Zip the Pinhead, born in 1842 with microcephalic dwarfism, died in 1926. Commodore Nutt, born in 1814, a dwarf who died in 1881, and Joseph Merrick, born in 1862, who suffered with severe deformities, who died in 1890. Prince Randian, born in 1871 with no arms or legs, died in 1934. Schlitzie Simon Metz, born in 1901 with microcephalic dwarfism, died in 1971. Minnie Woolsey, Cuckoo the Bird Girl, born in 1880 with Fachal-Seckel syndrome, a rare growth disorder, died at some point after 1960, the date unknown. Johnny Eck, born in 1911 with truncated torso due to sacral agenesis, which meant he was born without his lower torso, died in 1991.
Most of the acts worked for P.T. Barnum and Barnum and Bailey Circus. P.T. Barnum at the time was considered the world's most famous showman and is considered the author of modern-day advertising. In 1840 he started his museum, which featured a constant rotation of novelty acts. Barnum's American Museum made freaks a major attraction. However, he often constructed the freaks himself. One of these hoaxes was the Fiji Mermaid, which Barnum rented for $12.50 a week. One of the most famous acts was Charles Stratton, General Tom Thumb, who performed under Barnum most of his life. He retired in 1865 when his museum burnt down, and upon his death in 1891 he donated half his life's earnings to acts working for him who didn't make as much money. Despite this, he was and still is criticized for the exploitation of acts working for him. Many people today are still born with these disabilities. However, society has striven to give equal rights to the disabled. We spoke to Andrew Martin, who was born with acrothesia, a common cause of dwarfism, to see what his views on freak shows are.
Hi, my name is Andrew. I work at the local Asda on the checkouts. I'm a para-badminton player for Great Britain, and I also perform in pantomime at Christmas.
What is your opinion on the freak shows and how the performers were treated?
My views are very strong, as I am against it because I see that it presents the performers in a negative way. It comes across as they're forced to do things they're not comfortable with, and it's not making a positive image of themselves. And in some instances, it's not pleasant to watch. But I have to think about, is it the only way for them to earn money, or are they being forced into doing the shows that they do? I do feel that society's views have changed since then, as it makes it look like a bit of a joke, and then people see them in public, or people see people with disabilities in public, and think, well, if they're doing that on TV, then it's funny.
There have been some shows on television that have used actors who have physical or mental impairments, but the most famous is American Horror Story Freak Show. It follows the story of one of the last running freak shows in America, and some of the actors used had a physical disability. These actors are Matt Fraser, who played Paul the Illustrated Seal, was born with thalidomide-induced phocomalia. Yoti Amij, who played Ma Petite, was born with achondroplasia. Rose Siggings, who played Legless Susie, born with sacrogenesis, which caused her legs to be severely deformed, had her legs amputated. Ben Wolfe, who played Meep, was born with pituitary dwarfism.
Many of the actors used in the film were popular sideshows acts and had never acted before. The film had to change its ending as it was not only considered too gruesome, but it gave the people represented in the film a bad image, so it had to be toned down for release. Yet still it was banned for 30 years. Freak shows were seen as a normal part of American culture in the 19th century and early 20th century. They were seen as a valid way of entertainment for the middle classes. Some people argue that freak shows were beneficial to the acts featured in them as it gave them a job, a place to live, and most importantly, afforded them a salary. However, other people argue that showmen like P.T. Barnum were exploiting the acts for profit. Changing attitudes towards disabled has led to a decline in the freak show. We asked people what they thought about freak shows.
Do you feel that back then showmen exploited people who were different or who had disabilities?
I suppose because it was a different time, yeah, perhaps for money, if it was for the circus or something like that, then it probably would have been a good way to make a profit.
Maybe a little bit. I don't know too much about it, but maybe it was kind of, I don't know much about it, but it was kind of a living back then, so I suppose if you had that kind of skill or like difference, it's not really much of a big deal just showing other people about it.
Oh yeah. Showmen for a freak show would rub their hands in glee the minute they saw somebody with a disfigurement.
I feel like maybe they did discriminate against them, but they gave them jobs and a place they could go where most places they weren't accepted. In some cases it was a family for them, people that accepted them and were like them, and they learned to live together like that.
To some extent, I think society looks at people slightly differently. People who have, what should we say, have got minor disfigurements. Society seems to cope with that reasonably well. But it's when it comes around to those major disfigurements, large heads, small bodies, whatever, I think there's still an element where society cringes perhaps fractionally.
Everywhere you go there's always something, like it's ramps and lifts, and it's just easier access for disabled people these days.
It's not more of a go-on show. I don't really think it's things that people want to see, like in a big show. I definitely think people are definitely more acceptable about it. It's more of like an everyday thing. If you pass someone, they should look a bit peculiar or something like that, you might think it's a bit weird, but nothing more than that.
You see people in the street and you treat them like a normal person no matter what, really.
In 1880, human phenomenon were combined with a variety of entertainment. In 1890, tent size and number of sideshow attractions increased. In 1920, the circus was declining as a major form of entertainment.
Dime museums became a different way to display people seen as freak shows under the guise of education. These museums shows live acts, wax figures, and even stuffed animals. However, freak shows were the main attraction from 1870 up until 1900. These museums were a big part of the American freak show culture. Even though by the 20th century the popularity of the freak shows had decreased dramatically, many popular shows we see on television today still use the simple dynamics of the freak show.
Shows like Britain's Got Talent and X Factor follow the same dynamics of sideshows, as even though they display people who have a really good talent, the largest number of contestants shown are used purely for people to laugh at. They show people who may not necessarily be that talented, so the audience will be entertained. This could be seen as a similar approach to sideshow entertainment, yet we don't necessarily see these shows in the same way we see freak shows, as these shows aren't seen as controversial, unlike freak shows now are, as even today they hold a lot of controversy. So even though now we aren't paying money and lining up outside the circus, should we not ask ourselves how this is any different? Just because we are at home in front of a TV and not standing in a crowd? Have we really stopped exploiting people for our own entertainment?